pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to welcome you to tonight's City Council meeting. Kay, would you please call the roll?
Osbacher, Gordon, Jeffers,
Here.
McComber,
Here.
Roland,
Here.
Seeliger,
Here.
Zanfordino.
Here.
The minutes of the last meeting have been distributed to council. Is there a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any additions or corrections? All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Okay, do we have any correspondence?
Yes, received from Finance Director Brian Bouchong is a listing of budget transfers for this month, and copies of those were distributed to you prior to the meeting for your approval.
Thank you.
So I need a motion to approve them.
Is there a motion to approve those budget transfers?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now it's time for
No, I have-
official.
I have one more
Oh,
thing.
sorry.
But that's okay. Also received on the prior to March 1 were the park and recreation fees changes and list. I emailed all of those changes to you, and so I need a motion to approve the changes in the park and rec fees.
Okay. Is there a motion to change the park and rec fees?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the changed park and rec fees.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for official reports. Acting Mayor Mike Osbacher.
Good evening, thank you. Mayor Edwards and Mrs. Edwards are on a well-deserved vacation, so there is actually nothing for me to report from the mayor's office this evening. But I do have the honor of asking Margaret Montague and Morgan Hollinsworth to come forward to make a presentation on behalf of the Human Relations Commission. No? Next meeting. Okay, so we'll delay that until the next meeting. Very good, thank you. So, I guess that's my report. How's that for a short mayor's report?
Very brief, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Municipal Administrator Treader.
Good evening. A reminder that the Interfaith Breakfast will be on April 5th at the Junior Fair Building at the Wood County Fairgrounds. Breakfast will be served from 7:15 until 7:45, with the program scheduled to start at 8 a.m. The theme will be Building Peace Through Understanding Myth-Busting, and will feature speakers from a variety of religious streams addressing the challenges to peace which come from public misconceptions. The event is free and open to the public, but reservations are required. The information is being sent out to the media and on the website and so forth, so that you can get that information where to RSVP. But we want to keep that out there as we're hoping for great community attendance on April 5th. At the last council meeting, a relative of the homeowners at 811 West Wooster Street came before council and expressed concerns about the impact of the 75-foot limitation for the city's carry-out and carry-back service. I wanted to follow up with you to report that the city will be picking up the containers from the location that was requested by the family. Mayor Edwards phoned the family on Friday to pass the information along. The authority to waive the 75-foot requirement is granted in section 94.29 of the codified ordinances, and so the waiver has been granted. The other concern that was brought up at that meeting was about the rutting in front of the property. What's happening is that our vehicle is needing to pull into the driveway almost parallel, and because it's a 40-foot vehicle, it's hard for the driver to get in there. So we'd like to meet with the family to discuss that and talk about that, but we've been unable at this time to arrange such a meeting. And that completes my report, subject to your questions.
Does the driver, Lori, pull into the driveway back in, or does he go in forward?
He actually goes in parallel because he needs to keep the arm in the driveway so that when the container comes out, it can be picked up.
Which lane of traffic is he in on?
So he's going with the
Westbound or eastbound?
eastbound.
Going eastbound. Okay, so he's right on the same side of the road as the house.
Correct. And so he's pulling in and he needs to get over a bit because the problem is if he stayed in the lane and then he gets out of the vehicle, you know, that would be a danger to him. Also, because it's a big vehicle, you know, with that being that curve there, that would also impede traffic from coming around there. So again, we're wanting to work on that. We certainly, you know, don't want to be leaving ruts in people's yards. We're just challenged on how to do that, and we think that if we look at it.
When he gets, if we're gonna pick the trash up by the house, 220 feet, is he able to drive up there and then turn around and come back going forward, or does he have to back out to get out? Do you have to back in one direction or the other?
He's coming parallel, so if this is the driveway here, he's coming like this, and he's parking.
Oh, okay. He parks at the end of the
Right.
driveway, goes get the trash cans,
Right.
brings them down to the end of the driveway.
Empties it.
Oh, okay.
Gets in the truck,
Okay.
empties it, gets out of the truck, takes the container back. So, again, the issue is just that because it's it's a 40-foot vehicle, getting it pulled over. So we'll continue to work on that and trying to reduce that impact for that
Is
homeowner.
this a newer vehicle than was used prior to the trash can ordinance being passed?
I think it's a vehicle, Brian, we've been using for, since we
And
moved to
what did
automated.
they do before we passed this? I mean, was he doing the same thing last August that
I would
he's
presume.
going to be doing now?
Yeah, I would presume. Yeah, I think the ruts have been an ongoing issue for the family.
Oh, it's ongoing. Okay.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, so and so they brought that concern up, and because they brought that to you, I wanted to follow up on that with you as well.
So the vehicle is parked on West Street while he gets the trash can.
That is correct. Sorry, I apologize if that wasn't
Okay,
clear,
no,
Mike
it wasn't
or
clear
Bob.
to me exactly what was happening. I could understand that that's a place to park that,
Right.
given the traffic. Back spot on.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Director Heather Saylor, I believe, is not here this evening, and Mrs. Otley is also not here. Okay,
Must be
and
spring break, Bruce.
Kids in
yeah,
school.
Yeah. Mr. Marsh. It saves us money. Good.
That raise issue comes up every time the mayor takes a vacation from Marsh, you know that?
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah. Utilities Director, Mr. O'Connell.
Good evening. Just two items here. Last week I was in Washington, D.C. with the APPA legislative rally and our other AMP partners to meet with our federal legislators about public power issues that are important to Bowling Green and the rest of us. So we did meet with Representative Latta, his staff, and Senator Portman and his staff as well. Senator Brown, we had a meeting with him scheduled for Wednesday. He unfortunately was tied up on the Senate floor and didn't get a chance to break away and meet with us, but we did meet with his staff for at least 25 minutes or so, which was a good amount of time. And a lot of times they say if you can meet with their staff or their aides, that's kind of the important thing because they help draft or review information for the senators or the legislators, and they can convey that information. We did try and talk about possibly scheduling a phone call with Senator Brown at a later point in time when maybe he would be available, so we're looking forward to that. But the big issues we brought up in D.C. at the time, the last week, were the any changes to tax-exempt financing and how that impacts local communities, and trying to preserve that through any tax changes that may be proposed. We also talked a lot about the PJM capacity markets and the transmission charges that we pay for ourselves pay that to First Energy. That we really have very, very little say over what those charges are or how they're determined. And the rules continue to change each year. They don't seem to be the same. They modify them regularly. Just also another update about on our water side. Ohio EPA passed a law in 2016 that requires us to identify the water service line material that goes from our water main to the customer's residence. So the water service line is the small diameter pipe that carries the water to the customer. Roughly half of that is our responsibility. We go up to what's called the curb valve or the curb stop. Past the curb stop, and the curb stop again is typically located near the right-of-way line or just past the sidewalk. From the curb stop valve back to the house, then that's the homeowner's responsibility. So there's two legs of ownership there. But what they're trying to do is educate water consumers about possible lead sources in the piping that maybe delivers the water to them. So what they've asked every water supplier to do is to provide a map or put a map out that shows the material type of the water service line that goes from our main to the house. And so they want us to identify if it's non-lead, which would be copper or galvanized iron or plastic. If it's unknown, so maybe we don't know what the pipe material is, or if it's a lead service line. So that report is due to the EPA on March 9th. I'm planning on submitting our report tomorrow, March the 7th. But in a week or so, we're going to put out a website that customers can go to see what their pipe material is. We are not aware at this time of any known lead service lines in the city. The history goes back to 1967, and that the Board of Public Utilities at that time required all service lines to be copper. And several years ago, we did modify that policy to include plastic service lines as well. So service lines since that date could be plastic or copper. But prior to 1967, there had been lead service lines installed. Back in the late 80s and 90s, the Water Distribution Division went through, and on the portion of the line that's the city's responsibility, there were some lead service lines in town, and any known lead service line was replaced with copper back in the 80s and 90s roughly. So again, we don't know of any known lead service lines. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be some out there still. So again, the website is to try to educate customers about the potential for lead piping that could be on their property. We have tried to look in our records at any back history for lead service lines and trying to verify and double check that those lines were replaced. Again, we've not found any yet, but in some cases we likely will have to go out and we'll have to excavate or use our Vector truck to dig down and find the service line where the curb stop valve is, identify the pipe material on our side and the pipe material on their side. So there may be some cases where we have to go out and do that. That doesn't take a lot of time, so it's not a huge ordeal. But the map is the idea of the map, I think, from EPA is that it's going to be a continually updated process. By law, we're required to submit this map every 5 years, as well as this report. Another part of the report is that we have to identify plumbing materials that could be inside of a building, which the hard part and the frustration from my perspective is we don't regulate or monitor plumbing inside of a building. So in 1998, according to the Ohio EPA, the Ohio Plumbing Code changed to ban lead piping and also to ban lead solder if you have copper plumbing in your house. So anything pre-1998 could have lead solder, possible lead piping, but I doubt it. Or it could have lead in the fixtures that were put into the house. So like, say, the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink, those faucets, those rooms could have lead in those fixtures. So those are sources that could be inside of the house. Again, we have no records of those. All we know is about 83% roughly of the homes, according to the county auditor, were built prior to 1998. So anything after 1998 would theoretically have a reduced potential for lead exposure inside of their house. The state also changed the rules in 2014 for what they considered a lead-free or a low-lead fixture. They went from 8% down to 0.25%. So there's another date that triggered a change in plumbing codes. So we've put those numbers together, and that's again part of our report. The important thing to note here is that we have optimized the water plant for corrosion, to control corrosion in the distribution system. So the treatment process has been optimized. We also add a chemical called orthophosphate, which is a corrosion inhibitor, and we do regular lead and copper monitoring from several homes that volunteer. They take samples for us, meeting EPA requirements, and we've had no lead violations from any of these homes that we've tested. So I'm not trying to scare anybody or tell you that we have lead in our water or there's any kind of issue there. So please don't take that as the message. The message is that we're complying with the state law to provide information and education to our customers about what materials are out there that could be lead potential. So if we do find any lead service lines, our plan is to replace them immediately for the portion that's ours. If we find it on the customer side, we will work with those customers to encourage them to replace those lines. There's no state law, there's no requirement that says they have to be replaced, but in the interest of the homeowner's safety and trying to get the lead out, it would be best for everybody if those are replaced. So with our webpage, we'll have information on there that explains the water service line, whose responsibility it is, our side, their side. We'll have example pictures of what different pipe materials look like that it will help a homeowner identify what pipe material may be coming into their house. And then we're also going to have a link where they can go fill out a form and report back to us. If they see on the map that their water service line is inaccurately marked, or maybe our records are incorrect for their side of it, they can report back easily to us with a fillable form on the website. We can go out and inspect, what it is that they're seeing, and update our webpage, update our information, and try to make sure it's as accurate as possible. So I think that covers most of my water service line comments or updates. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Brian, hey, question. The Conneaut work we're doing, how is that progressing, and when do we expect that to wrap up?
It'll probably be out there another few months. It's progressing fairly well for the scope of the work that was being proposed for that water line replacement project. I know it's been ongoing for some time. We actually thought that we were going to have more downtime this winter if we had some really bad weather where we couldn't be out there working, but the winter has cooperated with us weather-wise, so we've been able to get more work done this winter, which has sped up the project from continuing it into the spring. So they've got probably several more weeks to go yet. This is a unique project for us. We've not really done a project of this size and scope internally before. Typically we've hired these projects out, but with the staff that we have now and the need to get the line replaced, the staff, we talked about, do you want to take this project on? Do you want to do this kind of a thing? And we all said, yeah, we think we can do this. So it is unique for us, but I think the staff is doing a good job. They've been trying to make sure there's not too many boil orders in the area, trying to minimize impacts to traffic. And we've worked with engineering and the public works staff as well about, as we would with any contractor. So got some more time yet.
Few months. All right.
Brian, about the water line report and process, anything built after 1998 is a given. There's no lead then. I mean, those structures don't even need to be examined. That would
Yeah, when
I
we do
assume.
lead and copper monitoring for our water samples, we're required to get samples from homes that are from 1983 up until the date that the state banned lead solder and lead pipe, which would be 1998. So we test homes that are within that threshold. They've got copper plumbing with lead solder. Again, if they had a lead service line, that would also qualify, but we're not aware that there are no known lead service lines remaining. So we had some homes years and years ago that had lead service lines, and they were on our sample list. Those lines got replaced, and so those homes were removed from the list, and new homes got added to it. So that's typically how they get selected, is they have to be within a certain age range or certain date range that would say your house or your age of your house is likely or potentially higher to have lead in it than others.
So each home then each home that has an issue will receive a report or some type of information?
EPA requires that after we take a sample, if we have a home that has a lead hit, or if we get a lead response from the sample, that we have to notify them immediately and educate them about the issues with lead. If it's a non-detect, which is the typical response or the typical lab report we get back from most of the samples that we take, we've got, I want to say between 2 and 5 days where we have to notify them that the sample was non-detect or was a 0. And if we don't meet those requirements, then we will get a violation from Ohio EPA that we didn't notify the customer in time, which I understand the need to notify customers, but if you have a 0 or a non-detect on the sample, you don't notify them, you get a violation for having a 0. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the way the law's written. So we comply with what the law says, and so whenever we get the samples back, we notify the customers immediately of what the results were, and our water plant staff takes care of that for us. They do all that work, but really it's dependent upon the customers. There's certain requirements about how they take the sample. They've got to wait. Typically they'll wait and take the first draw that next morning after they've gone to bed for the night. Water in the house has to sit for 6 hours without being used out of that one faucet. And so, those are all requirements the EPA has as part of their lead and copper monitoring that we have to follow. And so we educate the customer how to take the sample, where to take the sample. Getting the samples back sometimes is difficult because it is a burden on homeowners to have to do this repeatedly. But it's also an important health concern that needs to be monitored.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Kraft.
Kind of want to piggyback a little bit what Brian was saying about Conneaut. Of course, after the wireline job, there's still a force main pump station project to go, and there's still a paving project on Conneaut, which is connected to Fairview. So folks on Conneaut will be seeing some orange barrels for a while. So, but it's good. We're making things better. 2 weeks from today, we start a large item collection, March 20th. If people can have their stuff out, they can set it out on that weekend's fine. It has to be out at Monday morning at 7. We'll start in Ward 1. Just a reminder, the large item collection is not connected to your normal trash day. So if you just have it out 7 a.m., that crew will go around independently of the other crew doing the normal refuse collection. If you have a bed spring or a mattress, those items need to be prepaid because we get charged at the landfill for those. Another topic, the Poe Fairview traffic signal. Might see some work out there next week. We got a pre-construction meeting this Thursday. They've got some concrete vaults there sitting at the corner to get working on, and probably get some holes drilled, get some foundations poured, and start getting some signals put up. And that would remove the temporary signal and be the standard traffic signal like we have everywhere else in town now with the street name signs and the battery backups and all that. So that project will get rolling, and kind of another sign of spring. That's my report, and if you have any questions of me.
Any questions for Brian? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And at this time, we will hear introduction of new legislation.
Mr. President,
Mr. McComber?
from the Finance Committee, I have an ordinance amending and adopting Section 35.70 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, regarding city fees and fees charged for services.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zanfordino?
from the Transportation Safety Committee, we have a resolution expressing support of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials and the Ohio Department of Transportation efforts to establish U.S. bicycle routes.
Thank you. Any council committee reports? Let me just mention without Heather being here that there is a committee working on the Court Street Connects Festival. It's a dozen or so people. Have had several meetings already. A lot of nice things are going to happen there, mainly to test out a bike lane on the south side of Court Street. And if anybody wants to still jump in and help with that, I'm sure that committee would be glad to have your help. Okay, at this time, we are ready for lobby visitation. If you would like to address council, please come to the microphone, state your name and address.
Good evening, members of council, members of administration, citizens, and other interested parties. My name is Stephanie Lowers. I am a member of the Heider family. I have with me tonight my sister, Lori Slimbarski, my brother, Mark Heider, who will also be addressing council in a few short moments. Frankly, I was going to give a very abbreviated summary of what transpired at the last council meeting until I heard Ms. Treader get up and say some half-truths, mistruths, and non-truths that I'd like to address for the benefit of the record and clearing a few things up. The reason we came here originally was because of the passage of BG City Ordinance 8594.05B, which set a 75-foot limit for refuse container carry service in the city of Bowling Green. We have parents who are elderly and disabled and who have needed the service for more than 10 years. And in that 10 years, they've experienced a lot of bad behavior on the part of the city, in particular with the driver who likes to drive over the lawn, who likes to skip their service, and who also, I found out from my mother this weekend, liked to drop the container off behind the vehicle so she could run over it. My parents have made numerous complaints to the city of Bowling Green and to Mr. Kraft in particular, who have treated them with callous disregard, who have mocked my parents and have been very unkind. So when Ms. Treader seems to suggest that we're perhaps erring by not having a meeting with my parents in the city, I can tell you that I extended the invitation to them, and they have no intention of meeting with the city after being treated like garbage. No pun intended.
Mrs. Lowers, I'm going to interrupt just a little bit here.
Sure.
I want to be sure that a couple things don't happen. I don't want you to drag our staff
I'll
through
try
the
and
mud on
modify my
this, and
comments to just what the
Thank you.
issues are, and I apologize. I apologize for my passion last time I was here, and also this time. None of us are here because we didn't have anything better to do tonight. We're very concerned about my parents, and it's something that we care very deeply for them. We have wanted to intervene over the years and have been asked to stand down, but once their refuse collection stopped, all bets were off in our opinion. But I will try and modify the comments. One of the things that Ms. Treader mentioned had to do with the length of the refuse vehicle. I'd like to point out that the width of the driveway at the end is 37 feet. So a 40-foot garbage truck, in my opinion, and I'm not by any means an expert, should not be driving 24 feet over a lawn when there's less than 3 feet of clearance. Now, I could understand perhaps if this happened every time the driver went to pick up the refuse, but it doesn't. So to me, that means that sometimes it's deliberate and sometimes it isn't. That's a supposition on my part. I think it's a reasonable supposition. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that in the past several days, we have had a couple of invitations for a meeting. The first one was extended by Mr. Fawcett on behalf of himself and Mr. Kraft. We respectfully declined to meet with them because they had taken the option of amending the ordinance off the table. And I suggested to Mr. Fawcett that if that was willing to be discussed again, we'd be more than happy to reconsider our position on that. Secondly, Ms. Treader referred to having a meeting to discuss damage to the property. But the invitation for a meeting, which I have copied here, and I'd like to pass it if you don't mind, makes no mention of talking about damage to the property. It only has to do with resumption of the container carry service and there being a number of different ways to get there. Of course, our position has always been, all you really have to do is ask the driver to get out of the truck, go pick it up and bring it in and bring the can back. There's not really a whole lot of ways to get there, just asking the driver to please do their job. This is for council's benefit, the invitation extended to my parents by Mr. Fawcett for a meeting. I did mark here where it says that the amending the ordinance was off the table. And that's something that, when I first approached this issue, I didn't want to come to city council. I thought I could just reach out to somebody within the department, explain the situation, and perhaps get some resolution. And I did that privately with Mr. Fawcett. And after he consulted with Mr. Kraft, I was told that there was no way that the city would reconsider its position about coming to collect my parents' garbage from the portico.
Let me be clear on this now. Your intention now is to straighten out this situation for your parents.
Right.
And so, what about if you and I and Mrs. Treader and maybe your ward councilman met after this meeting? Could we maybe discuss some of these details a little further? Do you think that we can?
We probably could, and I did suggest the. Regrettably, the mayor called me on Friday and left me a message on my cell phone, and I had walked out of the house without my cell phone and got to Bowling Green to work, didn't have it, so I didn't get his message until after he had already left for vacation. And I would like to say on behalf of the mayor, and unfortunately he's not here, I thought he was a very stand-up guy. After the meeting, he was very apologetic with me about the experiences that my parents have had. And I thought the message he left me on the phone was very well spoken. Once I got home, I did get a message from Ms. Treader about trying to schedule a meeting over the weekend or sometime today. We all had plans over the weekend. We also, since we pay taxes in the city of Bowling Green, had to go to work today. But again, my interpretation of her message was that they really didn't want to talk about amending the ordinance. And that this didn't relate to the damage in the yard at all. To me, that's a lesser issue because, for one thing, it's really the city's public right-of-way that the driver's damaging. It does drag debris onto the driveway, or snow and ice, and creates a little bit of a difficulty for my parents to get over it in the wintertime. But that's mainly it. The only other thing I brought with me was something that my mother asked me to please share. And this is a picture that she took, one of a number of pictures she's taken over the years, of the full container being not collected and the condition of the driveway at the time that it wasn't collected. I didn't bring a whole bunch of pictures because I didn't think cumulative was really relevant. Mark, am I missing anything, or would you like to speak now? Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my brother, who's got some other things he'd like to share.
Your name again, sir?
My name is Mark Hyder. I live at 403 West Worcester Street. First, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts made by council members and city administrators over the last week with respect to the 75-foot rule as it pertains to trash collection for my parents. It's my understanding that the city has offered to resume trash collection, suspending the rule as it has been applied to the residents at 811 West Worcester. This is a step in the right direction, and I trust the city will honor this commitment. I guess the question I have is I did look up the 94.29 waiver section, and it says in there that it can be temporary or permanent exemption. Which one of those is it? I didn't hear you say whether it was permanent or temporary. Okay. I have prepared remarks that include details regarding the situation my parents have faced due to this rule. I would like to provide these details despite the city's offer to resolve this matter, because I believe the context of those details is useful in framing this discussion. And please pardon my reading from this prepared statement instead of presenting extemporaneous discussion of the matter. I have a number of points I want to make, and reading from the prepared remarks will ensure that I did not miss any of them. So I apologize if I'm basically reading this, but I really want to make sure we get all this covered. Members of the Hyder family are here tonight to once again raise concern about the actions and inactions of the city, its administration, and employees, actions that have been blatantly unfair, unsafe, and decidedly non-inclusive. We're specifically talking about the passage last summer of BGCO 94.05 Part B, which imposed an arbitrary 75-foot limit on carry container service for individuals who are disabled. This ordinance legislated away the public accommodation that has been afforded to our parents, Jim and Ruth Hyder, for at least the past 10 years. We find the passage of the ordinance particularly bewildering in light of the news article that appeared in the February 26, 2017 edition of the BG Independent News that included the following. Roger Grant, a member of the Bowling Green Human Relations Commission, said that the city is committed to diversity and acceptance. It's a place that is welcoming, safe, and inclusive for all residents, Grant continued, where you can live and thrive and be treated fairly. It does not matter if you're identified as an immigrant or a refugee. My question is, should this not also include persons with disabilities? The article continues. The commission is currently working on a resolution for the city council to make this commitment. Council member Sandy Rowland has voiced her early support for the resolution. She said Bowling Green has a reputation of being welcoming and safe. We want to stay that way. I applaud that sentiment. At least as it relates to the Hyders, the city's actions do not appear to match up to its words. As you may be aware, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was signed into law in 1990, nearly 3 decades ago. Title II of the ADA applies to state and local government entities. Subtitle A protects qualified individuals with disabilities from discrimination on the basis of disabilities in services, programs, and activities provided by state and local entities. This includes refuse and trash collection service. Municipalities across the country, including nearby Toledo, have run into issues with respect to their lack of service to people with disabilities in trash collection. In Toledo's case, after much back and forth finger pointing between the city of Toledo, Lucas County, and their private contractor, Republic Services, and while simultaneously under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice, a plan was worked out to accommodate trash pickup for residents of Toledo who are disabled. The following excerpts are taken from the 2015 Toledo Blade article regarding trash pickup in Toledo and the plan that was enacted to provide accommodations to disabled there. Under the plan, residents with disabilities are asked to call to set up service. A representative from the trash hauler will then visit their home to establish a customized plan to accommodate them. This plan satisfies a Department of Justice review of the trash removal services for the disabled and is compliance with standards under Federal 1990 American with Disability Act. People with disabilities have the right to services just like any person, whether that means access to a building or trash removal. That's a quote from Assistant U.S. Attorney Angelita Cruz Bridges, who led the U.S. Department of Justice investigation in Toledo. From an October 27, 2014 article in the Toledo Blade, interviews were conducted with officials from cities that provided trash collection accommodations for disabled persons. Kristen Soberg-Witt, Director of Advocacy for Disabled Rights Ohio, says cities and counties are required to provide equal access to all programs and services under federal law. When asked about the 75-foot rule, this isn't from the article, but when asked about the 75-foot rule, a BG official told my sister that here, most disabled residents find someone to take care of transporting their container for them, or they hire the work out. If this is true, such voluntary action on the part of some residents of BG does not absolve the city from its obligations under ADA to provide this service. Continuing now from the same 2014 article in the Blade, Ron Volk, chairman of Toledo-Lucas County Commission on Disabilities, is quoted as saying, "There are people who depend on neighbors, relatives, or friends, but the rules of ADA say that's not how you get taken care of, and whoever provides the service, meaning trash collection, has to provide it, meaning the carryout services." Also from the same article, 24 residents of Bowling Green get help from the city trash workers there, said their Public Works Director, Mr. Kraft. "If people write me a letter and back it up with a disability placard and a doctor's note, our drivers will get out of the truck, bring the container to the curb, dump it, and return the container. We feel it's an extension of helping people out. Do I feel there are a few in there stretching it out? Sure, but it's not worth ruffling the feathers with a big picture of it." Therefore, according to that quote, Mr. Kraft acknowledges the carry-out service is a part of the duties of the department in its service to the citizens of BG. He stated at that time there were 24 households who took advantage of carry-out service in 2014. It is my understanding that the number of households decreased to 15 in 2016, and it now stands at 10 per the documents that were given to my sister. The question is, what has changed? What has changed that requires restrictions now, despite declining rather than increasing demand? I was told the reasons Mr. Kraft provided a council member for this rule were A, there were concerns about maneuverability of the truck on private drives longer than 75 feet, and B, there was a desire to minimize the time driver had to spend walking to provide the service. The ordinance as written specifically mentions city collection vehicles will not traverse onto private property for refuse collection, so maneuverability on private drives is clearly not at issue. Rather, the city worker stops his vehicle on the roadway while he retrieves the containers. As far as the walking part goes, it is clearly less burdensome for an able-bodied city worker to walk the required distance than for someone with a disability to do so. In the case of my parents, the distance from the road to where the trash receptacles are stored is approximately 210 feet. The way the law reads, my parents are required to take those containers approximately 150 feet toward the street, which is mostly downhill, then walk back up the hill to the house. Once collection has been completed, they would need to take that same walk to retrieve the container, so their total walking distance would be 600 feet, mostly up and down a hill. Meanwhile, the city worker would be required to walk 75 feet each way on level ground to retrieve and then return the container for a total of 300 feet. This means that the disabled resident is required to walk twice as far as the worker who is providing the accommodation. That surely does not sound like a reasonable accommodation to me. To me, this is analogous to a situation where a city service a resident who is disabled needs to utilize is offered on the 4th floor of an office building that has no elevator. The equivalent accommodation for that situation would be for the city worker to come down one flight of stairs while requiring the resident needing the service to climb 2 flights of stairs to meet them. This would minimize the walking time for the city employee, but clearly would not be meeting the needs of the citizen they are serving. If the resident could make it up 2 flights of stairs, they could probably make it up 3. Similarly, if my parents could transport the containers 150 feet of the way toward the street, they could get them the rest of the way. In the case of trash collection, although the worker is minimizing his walk times under the new rule, he is clearly not meeting the citizens' needs. Earlier in discussions with my sister, Mr. Fawcett proposed maintaining the 75-foot rule, but allowing the container to be permanently stored at the location 75 feet from Worcester Street. This is not a workable solution. Under that plan, they would still need to get the trash to those containers, or store their trash inside their home, or leave the trash outside, not in a container, exposed to the elements and animals potentially. Again, if they could get the trash to that location on their own, they would not need the container carry service to begin with. And I realize that the city has made an accommodation here in this case, but These are the facts as of at least last week. Based on responses to the Freedom of Information Act request my sister's made, talks with council members, and review of past city council meeting minutes made available online, there was no discussion or debate whatsoever regarding the need for a 75-foot rule or the effects that it may have on those who use the service. It appears that Mr. Kraft chose an arbitrary number, which was then simply placed into the legislation and approved. Given the absence of documentation furnished in response to the FOIA request, there is also no evidence that anyone made a formal request of the law director to review this rule for possible conflicts with the ADA, nor is there any evidence of written advice being provided to council with respect to ADA compliance from the law director. We respectfully request council and the city administration take the following actions, and the first one we've already heard. First, issue an immediate suspension of the new rule as it pertains to the Height of residents at 811 West Wooster Street, with carry-out service resuming as it was prior to the rule being adopted, that is, with no distance restriction. As stated previously, it appears the administration is willing to take this step. Second, amend the Bowling Green City Ordinance 94.05B2A to remove the distance restriction completely or eliminate Part B2A. As an alternative, distance rule could be replaced by one that specifies that those who utilize this service should locate their containers on a paved surface as near as practical to the entrance to the home that is closest to the street. This would be a reasonable rule that would minimize the amount of walking as much as possible for the worker providing the service. It would not exclude any residents from using the service despite the length of their driveway. If Bowling Green is going to live up to its goal to be a place that's welcoming, safe, and inclusive for all residents, this is the least that can be done for anyone who is disabled. Third, a procedure should be put in place for any future legislation that affects residents with disabilities to ensure that the law director reviews the proposal. Council should not approve any disability-related legislation without receiving a written opinion from the law director that the provision does not violate the ADA or other laws protecting those with disabilities. I believe that such a procedure would have prevented this particular ordinance from ever being enacted and would have saved everyone a lot of time and trouble. Lastly, the council should avail itself of continuing education courses to familiarize its managers and employees on the important issues of non-discrimination in the ADA. In summary, from an ADA perspective, it seems that the city has little choice other than to rescind this regulation, as this statement from the Justice Department spells out quite clearly. Title II of the ADA of 1990 requires public entity to make reasonable modifications in its policies, practices, or procedures when necessary to avoid discrimination on the basis of disability, unless the public entity can demonstrate that making the modifications would fundamentally alter the nature of the service, program, or activity. See section 35.130B7 of the Title II rule. It is hard to imagine BG successfully defending that trash carryout service for persons with disabilities fundamentally alters the nature of trash collection in the city, especially considering this accommodation has been in place for at least 10 years. The 75-foot limit restriction constitutes an illegal discrimination under the ADA on the part of the city and should be rescinded, not just for my parents, but for all residents of BG who may be similarly situated, now or in the future. In addition to being legally required by federal law, it is simply the right thing to do. Thank you for allowing me the time to address this situation, and I look forward to the ordinance being amended or removed. If you have any additional clarification from me, if any additional clarification is needed, or you want me to provide the references for the items I cited in this statement, please let me know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hyder. Okay, are there any other inputs from citizens? Okay, at this time, we will move to the reading of legislation.
Legislation for first reading. Resolution number 3661 for first reading. Resolution expressing support of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials and the Ohio Department of Transportation efforts to establish U.S. bicycle routes. Ordinance number 8570 for first reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 35.70 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding city fees and fees charged for services. Ordinances for second reading. Ordinance number 8568 for second reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 33.18 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, relative to salaried employees not subject to overtime pay. Ordinance number 8569 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the municipal administrator and the utilities director to seek qualifications and/or advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for design, engineering, right-of-way acquisition, construction, and other services relating to improvements for State Route 25/64 pavement rehabilitation and utility improvements. Legislation for third reading. Ordinance number 8562 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 33.01G of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, regarding salary schedule established.
Mr. President,
Mr. McComber?
I move to adopt ordinance 8562.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, would you please call the roll?
Jeffers?
Yes.
McComber?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Seeliger?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Motion carries. Ordinance 8562 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8563 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts and/or participate in State of Ohio purchasing programs for the purchase of vehicles and equipment, as well as the trade-in, transfer, or sale of vehicles and equipment being replaced and/or no longer needed for municipal purposes.
Mr. President,
Mr. McComber?
I move to adopt ordinance 8563.
Second?
The ordinance has been seconded, proposed and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, would you please call the roll?
McComber?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Seeliger?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Jeffers?
Yes. Motion carries. Ordinance 8563 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8564 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to request qualifications and enter into a contract or contracts for professional services associated with a geographic information system joint use pole audit.
I move that we adopt ordinance 8564.
Second.
The ordinance has been firsted and seconded. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Roland?
Yes.
Seeliger?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Jeffers?
Yes.
McComber?
Yes.
Ordinance 8564 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8565 for third reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for water distribution and wastewater collection projects.
I move that we adopt ordinance 8565.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, would you please call the roll?
Seeliger?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Jeffers?
Yes.
McComber?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Ordinance 8565 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8566 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 152.20H1 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, regarding nuisance conditions prohibited.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zanfordino?
I move that we adopt ordinance 8566.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
I have a question regarding the ordinance itself. Is this an ordinance to establish what a nuisance condition is? Or is it an ordinance to address one of many nuisance conditions?
Yeah, I think it's to set up, it's to give authority that should a condition exist, that we have the authority to order it to be cleaned up in the interest of public safety, if I recall correctly.
Isn't anywhere
be seen, if we can board it up, even though it's
Okay.
private property, and not just walk away and leave it that way. That's what it's intended to.
Okay, entirely different from what I was thinking. Okay. Okay, you cleared it up for me. I didn't know which one it was, but I understand the intention now.
But this gives the city the right to address a property that, let's say, is abandoned and neglected, broken windows. So it wouldn't be one property, it would be that, I see. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, if there's no other further discussion, Kay, would you please call the roll?
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Jeffers,
Yes.
McComber,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes,
Seeliger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ordinance 8566 is adopted. Any other business to come before council tonight?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Rowland?
in lieu of the conversation regarding the Hyder property, I would like to just say it's bad timing tonight because the mayor is out of town on vacation and he would want to be involved, I think. We have an acting president of Consol tonight, so things are just not quite normal. But I do hope that we may address the ADA situation to make sure we are in compliance, and if not in compliance, that we take. I think the ADA needs to be looked at, and I'm assuming you're happy that it's going to be, the property will now be one in which the driver will leave the truck, walk up the driveway, pick it up from the house, but you still want us to look.
For that thought, because my intention originally was just to try and rectify the situation for my parents. Perhaps selfishly, my brother was concerned about the others that would also fall under this rule. And I think it's important that you look at that for that
And
reason.
I'm certain our community wants to be ADA compliant in every circumstance that we possibly can, so that shouldn't be anything that stands in the way from getting this taken care of, I hope. Yeah, well, I would ask that it be taken up with the people who are already addressing it rather than just one council member, because we have people who have already spent a week working on this, and they should.
Things that I found in doing my research, that this appears to be clearly a violation of the ADA.
As someone who worked for the ADA for 7 years, I'm not convinced that it's as clear as you folks think it is.
Look up the city of New Rochelle, New York, almost identical situation. In fact, we may have a printout of
I
the
think
letter
you do.
that took place from the Justice Department regarding the situation.
Mr. President, could they come to the microphone because none of this is on the record if I can't hear it?
Perhaps this is something we could continue after the meeting here. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
We need a motion to excuse Mr.
Oh, yeah, right, thank you. Is there a motion to excuse Mr. Gordon?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now is there a motion to adjourn?
There is, Bruce.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.